Excellent. All right. Yay. All right. Good team. So we've been through a whole bunch of bullshit trying to get this particular session up and running. So we'll just go dive right into it. This is my friend Athan, who I have worked with for nigh on 20 years. He's been a tremendous friend. Our booking agent has helped us with record labels and many, many, many other things. But we're actually here to talk about one of his other passions, which we will obviously get to. So we start, as always, with the obligatory question. What was the first thing as a kid that held you for a few weeks, that made you want to learn about all of it, whatever that thing might be?
Now, is this anything, or is this as it relates to?
No, it can be anything. I mean, it's neat because sometimes that stuff does weave its way,
I seem to recall as a kid taking an interest, even from a very early age, in history.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's kind of been following me my whole life. So I'd say I started having an interest in that around 4 or 5 or so. And I remember one time I guess my sister had just been born, or was maybe soon to be born. And we had gone to Cape Cod, I guess, or Montauk, one of the towns along the beach with a big port. And I remember the whaling urns that they used to melt down the whale fat and make oil to burn in lamps and things back in the 1820s and 1830s. And I was somehow fascinated by that as a kid. So I might have been 4. So that's probably the beginning of that. But other than that, it was the same thing that most kids get into: G.I. Joes, Matchbox cars, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the G.I. Joes kind of led me to an interest in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a passion of mine for my whole life.
Yeah, and that even manifests now with the aesthetic of not your new, but your band. With noir, I think it all has that sort
Well,
of...
I guess you could say in some ways they are. I mean, there's a lot of breadcrumbs there that we'd have to discover. But yeah, I guess my interest in the late 30s and 40s led me to the history of the war and the clothing of the war and wartime rationing and movies made during that era and that had the war as a backdrop. Let's say Casablanca and so many others. Yeah, I guess they are all connected. So it's proven your point. You're correct.
So do you collect? Because my initial thought with this was talking about, because you're an avid record collector. I mean, almost every time I talk to you, you're telling me about some show that you just went to, and there's a cart that you're pulling around and stuff. But do you also collect memorabilia for like war, things like that?
No, not necessarily from. Although I'm interested in the war, I mean, I have a lot of books on it, but I wouldn't say necessarily, war memorabilia. But the era,
Mm-hmm.
I often tell people, like when it comes to vintage stuff, that I'm kind of into 1926 to about 1962. I really like that window of time. But yeah, I collect a lot of records from that era, sure. Probably, in fact, even in the years encapsulated in those 2 years, there's quite a bit of records that I'm interested in. But I also like other things. I like, obviously, 50s and 60s and 70s pop, rock, R&B, and a whole host of things. But jazz and big band and vocalists from the 30s and 40s are very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff is actually very easy to find.
Really, yeah. That was one of the things I was wondering about was if there are like do you go out and say you're specifically trying to get specific artists, or do you just kind of go and just see what's what? Like, is there something?
Somehow I ended up becoming kind of I don't know, it's funny, like you don't even know you're doing it sometimes, but I over the decades I started to kind of become this musicologist, and only because I was such a collector of music. And you end up, when you go to these record shows, since it's pretty much everything that came out in the 20th century, and occasionally I vend at these record shows. And so a lot of people kind of find it funny that I have these 80s. I have let's say an 80s section, and then next to that I have a goth industrial section. And they're pretty surprised that maybe just two rows over is big band vocalists and blues and things along those lines. And so people are a bit surprised, like, how could you be into both of these things? And I am. So
No, I mean, yeah.
it's just the way it all kind of came down. But these shows are really the record shows that I go to. Are really a bit of a mixed bag. I was just out in LA and I went to one. I'm going to be going to one in Pittsburgh pretty soon. I was at one in New Jersey over the weekend. And again, it's amazing. Like, you'll go up to somebody's booth and there's quite literally 100 years of music. And it's like you're flipping through and it's Missing Persons, Sinatra, Al Jolson, Benny Goodman, Jimi Hendrix, and like because they're all the same size. They're all 12 by 12. They're all records. They just kind of fit in together. And some of these guys aren't very organized when they sell. I like to keep my stuff very organized to make it very easy on people. Like, oh, you want B-52s? They're right there, or whatever. But for the most part, I just like digging through, reading the liner notes on the back, learning. It's just, and I just retain these things. Which came in very handy because I started writing liner notes for record companies in the 90s. And I was hired to do anything from Gary Numan to Billie Holiday to Willie Nelson. So
Yeah.
I did all kinds of liner notes. And, I mean, you and I both lived the life. I mean,
Yeah.
you make your music, and you try to do things that are related to music, or related to art, let's say, that maybe help pay the bills a little bit. And so I wrote liner notes for a solid 25 years. I don't get much work like that anymore, just because there's really not a lot of it out there, with the way things
Everything's
have
digital
changed.
now. There's the
Yeah, exactly.
on.
And although obviously vinyl has made quite a comeback, a lot of them are reissues, and there were already liner notes there. So there's really not that much. I get a couple of those kind of gigs a year, but not much anymore.
So this is a weird one. I caught the very tail end of the 78s. I remember when I was a kid and my grandparents had, this cabinet with all their records in it. And well, like, we had the 6 records of Bambi, and it wasn't like side one, side two. It was like side one, side six, side two, side five. So it could fall and then play straight through. And I don't know if this is. Do 78s have a scent to them? Because I have this very strong, weirdly wood smell. And then somebody recently, I was reading about how they were made out of lacquer. So I was wondering if they actually did outgas or something like that. Have you ever noticed that? Or am I just
Well,
like,
I know a little bit about this, for the strangest reason in the world. Well, it's a real record geek thing. So during the war, oddly enough, getting back to the war, they banned releases from coming out, by record companies. In other words, the entire country was geared towards the war effort. And the reason for it was, there were certain plastics and that they used to wrap nylon wire that they needed as part of the war effort. But that was the tip of the iceberg. I think they again, So very few artists recorded during the war. And so somebody at the War Department came up with this idea to issue these V discs and V disc victory discs.
Hmm.
And so artists were very happy because they were able to go back in the studio and make recordings again. But they were for one purpose, to send to the soldiers fighting in Europe so they could listen to music while in foxholes and whatnot. And so I don't remember exactly. The old records were made out of shellac. Yes, there was some kind of shellac that they were made of, but they were very brittle.
Hmm.
So the 78s were very brittle. And so somewhere in the war, they added something called formvar, which must have been a plastic of some kind that that extended the life of the record, and they weren't as brittle. I'm sure you remember, like there's even a scene in It's a Wonderful Life where she takes the 78 off of the player and smashes it,
I
and
was thinking
they
about the old rock and roll has got to go,
right.
that whole thing. And because I always looked at that and be like, you can't really do that though. But I see this is awesome because like I couldn't have planned that question better. Um,
Well, when you think about it, though, that even though they were adding things that were making the records a little bit more pliable,
uh-huh.
they probably continued to still be made out of some kind of hybrid,
Hmm.
and they probably remained brittle
Hmm.
deep into the 50s. Because if a lot of the records I have from the 50s, they break in a different way. By the time the 70s come along, I'm sure you've had Bowie albums, and RCA used not a flexi disc, but they had a name for it. But it was a very like it was the
Yeah,
first one that you could almost,
walk kind of thing.
and it would make noise, and they were very hard to break. I mean, you almost had to bend them all the
Yeah.
way around. And specifically Bowie and Elvis because they were on RCA. Oh, I can't even remember that, but there was something that they called it. But yeah, everything has changed a lot. Those 78s that the problem with 78s is you can only get one song per side.
Hmm.
So a lot of times the language that we use now, record album, it was
Right.
because a record would actually come in what looked like a picture album, and you would, here would be a sleeve for one song, and then of course you had the B-side, and then here's the second record, and so everything was like an 8 record set,
Hmm.
and they came in albums, and so
Hmm.
the word sort of stuck even after they weren't really like picture album. They weren't really like bound albums, but
Hmm.
I'm sure you come across them once in a while
Oh,
in
we've
your
got a whole set of like opera from back then that are in these beautiful bound, like
yeah,
hard cardboard.
really heavy too.
Hmm.
Yeah. But then they moved to the 12-inch and 33 and a third, I think somewhere around 1952, 1953 or thereabouts. And of course, the 12-inch 33 and a third was a lifesaver because you could get, you know, 6, 7 songs per side, and
Yeah, I
it
think it's like
really
20
changed
minutes
everything. It
per
changed the
side.
art form. What's that?
I think it's like 20 minutes per side, something like that.
Yeah.
All I know is
Yeah.
that it's never enough for me to actually cut everything in half right for what I do because I always write too much stuff. So
Well,
I am
think about this.
remarkably
Also, the other
inconvenient.
thing, most of those tunes were 2.5 minutes. Most of them were under three. So,
Yeah.
and 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 because they flowed consistent. Let's say you had 5 or 6 songs flowing consistently on one side, it kind of gave way to the concept album
Mhm.
because. And it sort of emanates from that same time period. Some people argue it was Sinatra, some people argue that it was Nat King Cole, but it was pretty close in that same time period. So
Yeah.
the concept album as we know it,
And that I guess would be when AOR became more of a thing, like album oriented rock as opposed to singles.
which would have been a teeny bit later,
Mhm.
but yes, the same concept. But singles remained pretty hot.
Mhm.
45s as we know it, deep into the 80s,
Oh
and
yeah.
so. Um, uh, but when I think of AOR, I guess I think of more things like Pink Floyd and things like that, that it's there's really not a single on there. It's more you have to have the whole so album-oriented rock. So you almost need to listen to the entire album.
Yeah.
Um, but early on, a lot of times bands that put out, especially into the rock era, the early rock era, if you put out a 12-inch or an LP, let's say, in the mid to late 50s, it was mostly a collection of your singles.
Mhm.
So rock hadn't really been thought of as like a conceptual thing. It
The
was
idea of the album as an art form, a full-length thing
right,
as an art form.
which is later.
Right.
Yeah. When it comes to rock, that's a little bit more into like the British Invasion, Stones, Beatles, kind of doing more, taking even what I was mentioning about Sinatra and Nat King Cole a little earlier, but then they're taking like, okay, we're going to write an entire album about love songs or something, and then we're going to, and so, and it's all new material. But for the most part, especially let's say we go back a few years before that, like Chuck Berry and people like that, they didn't really do studio albums. It was all singles.
Right.
So an album was just like I said, like a collection of their singles.
Hmm.
So things have changed, but then ironically, sometimes they don't change at all. Look how many bands now put out one song on Spotify. So
Hmm.
the single is returned. It's just changed a little bit. There's
Weird.
not
Yeah.
really there's not really a B-side anymore.
Right.
So
I always think I always do like whenever I write, I'll write like, okay, I've got a record coming out, so I'll have X number of songs I know, so I'm going to try and do like 8 or 10 more on top of that. And in my head, those are always the B-sides because I'm able to kind of go, okay, this dozen or whatever are all relatively accessible. Like I'm never totally accessible, but relatively. And then this other stack are like really weird. So those will be the B-side. So I'll put out, an EP or something with a couple more accessible things, and I'll just put the weird stuff to fill it out. And it's never
don't you feel sometimes though that because this conversation comes up a lot with different record companies that I've either worked for or been signed to, and when I'm talking to other artists, I I'll roll with the punches on the idea, let's say that, pardon me, of a one song single, but it just seems almost like I keep putting out EPs with Noir. I keep putting out EPs because I can't get into the mindset of just putting out one song. I
it's
mean, let's say one song with two or three remixes. I'll do it and I'll consider it, and I understand why people are doing it. It keeps Spotify engaged. I get it, but it feels like an hors d'oeuvre. It just is. It's like a tease. It just
I
I
have to
keep
have a
thinking of
really
things
good
like,
concept. Like if it is a song, like when I did Sellout, right? Like Sellout made absolute perfect sense as a one-shot single with some remixes on. Like because it was such a heavy-duty idea and not at all like my normal thing. So that kind of was like, okay, there. But I like working in groups. I like even with art, I tend to work in clusters of pieces because then like you have the one all-encompassing idea and then you're able to kind of pin variations within it. Like that just makes it a lot easier for me to write, and also I'm not like mentally pitching songs against each other. Like, no, you can all play where we got six of you guys. You're all good, so we're good here. As opposed to having to kind of go, okay, well, this one's more shiny, So I feel better about the overall package. I don't know. And the older I get, the more like, obviously, the more conceptual I've been getting, and the more I feel that like I don't know. I was actually just talking to somebody about this the other day. It's like I've really reached a point where I just don't give a shit anymore. Like I've written so many songs that now I'm just kind of going, hey, that's a really interesting idea, even if it's not necessarily, you know, as such hey, it's a library. I did one song. It's like a librarian for serial killers. Like there's a song. It's a cool idea. So it's playing with that stuff. So now I'm just like, whatever.
Not giving a shit is the most liberating thing.
It really is.
It's a thing I've been saying a lot lately. It's almost like I feel like I have the college degree and so all the rest of this stuff is just it's not it's nice to not have to okay, like I mean remember I'm sure you were at this point in your career at some time where you're engaged, you're playing live, you're starting to put out releases, you're working on side projects, and you're kind of you're building your reputation. And
Mhm.
so you're in the early phases of it. You're still in your first, I don't know, half dozen releases or something. But then as time goes on and you're 30, 40 titles into your,
Mhm.
again, you begin to realize like, yeah, look, there are no rules. And especially now where you can just release things over, record an album over a weekend and by Monday morning, have it up online. So, I mean,
I
there
actually
are no,
really like that because you are like just idea, idea, idea. You just lock into it and go and let it. Because like whenever this comes up, I'm always like the ideas are there. You bring them through as fast as you can and as fully as you can. And because the more you sit there, you try and fix it, and mold it into something. The in my opinion, it tends to get worse. Whereas if you can kind of like allow it to just happen and let it manifest as it does, you often get the really cool stuff that maybe you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
well, then you can also the other cool thing about it being 2025 and how things are now, uh, you can decide the limitation of the release.
Mhm.
Like I'm going to release a Halloween song or single with a couple of remixes, and I'm going to make it only Halloween, and I'm going to make it only Bandcamp.
Yeah.
So the way you can taper it for that occasion.
Mhm.
Whereas we were all very limited when it was like, look,
It
it's got
has
to
to
come
be a
out.
big thing.
It has to be exactly. It's an album. How many panels on the artwork? Are you going to do vinyl? Are you going to do cassette? It seems like so much more of a commitment. And the nice and digital can be very liberating when you look at it that way. Yes. So you can, I mean, I kind of like the idea of special occasion releases.
Mhm. Well, that
Halloween.
record, that record I just put out, Brittle, I did that in 2 weeks when my back was all fucked up. Like, remember when we talked?
Yeah,
Yeah, I,
yeah.
I did that from the bed, recording into like a USB microphone, everything else. But it worked, and so like just yeah, living in the future is awesome when it comes to that kind of thing. Like I didn't have to come in here and do this shit. I could just so back to records. So do you have you have to have relatively rarefied equipment then to enjoy a lot of this stuff. So do you have like vintage players or
I have the standard Techniques DJ turntable as my main
adopts?
turntable. But I do have some vintage gear. I have some different stuff here. Then well, up until recently, there are record stores that are out there, like I'm talking old school record stores that you go in and there's sort of a back room that has gear.
Mhm.
And you go in there and now granted, it's not like you find, German 1960s stuff in there. I mean, I guess once in a blue moon, but like I said, up until recently, you could go into a place like that and get good Japanese 70s stuff, like a ready to go Japanese turntable from, let's say, the late 70s, $75 or something like that. And as long as I'm sure you've got bags and bags of cables and whatnot, so you can get them to work in almost any
Mhm.
combination as long as you have a receiver. And so, yeah, I pick up some gear here and there. Yeah.
I'd like to think that somewhere along there you've got like a really a nice Victrola or like a wax cylinder player.
Well, I do have actually now you're going way back. So yeah, I do have a Victrola. Um, I
Right?
have so when it comes to creative stuff, yeah, it's got a crank on it.
Whoa.
I have I own Edison wax cylinders. In fact, let me grab, there's one right here. I'm going to grab it.
Commercial time. So normally this is when I would hold up a product and say, hey, look at this thing I do. Well, I can't do that right now because I'm talking about art. So in addition to all the music stuff that I do and writing and things, I'm an artist. I've got a degree in fine arts and everything. And if you really need to know, there's a video tagged on the end of this playlist or podcast on the end of this playlist, however it works, that has all my bullshit on it. But anyway, yeah, I do a ton of commission work, book covers, things like that. I mostly specialize in oil painting. I'm available for commissions. Recently, I've been trusted by people to do memorials or whatever you want to call them for living animals of their pets. My favorite being people who ask me to paint their pets as historical figures. So this picture here is a dog that was painted up to be Vlad the Impaler, which was a great deal of fun. Anyway, I am available for all of your art needs. So if you need anything like that for book covers or illustrations or CDs or whatever media is the thing somewhere in the future of now, assuming I'm not dead, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do it for you.
There. Edison Gold Molded Records. Well, it looks like it's reverse here.
Oh, it's not on the screen. It's not on the side. So you're.
Oh, okay. Edison record. So I don't have a player for these, but the player for that, it looks like a little sewing machine. It's maybe, about this big, and like I said, it plays it sort of plays sideways all the way through. But I also have another cool thing. I have, well, we used to call them close and plays when I was a kid. Then this one really doesn't do that, but it has like a beige leather exterior. It's from the 50s, but I keep it because it plays 45s, 78s, 33s. And so I keep it for that reason. And and you can flip the needle to use it on each different one. So it's got a needle on it that you use for 78s, and then you flip it, and then there's a needle that you use for 33 and 45. Because the 78 needle is, I mean, it looks like a nail. I mean,
really?
it's different, like a very pointy nail. So yes, I do have that stuff. I also own, maybe a dozen radios. So yeah, I got a lot of crap.
That's cool though. That's cool. I was have a friend, and I was trying to get him to like help me mod a shortwave radio so I could like an old school one with like actual proper audio out so I could run it into that shit. But we just never got around to doing it. Yeah.
That would actually, I mean, you know what I would find fascinating about that is that the white noise that comes from those, and to hear the human voice through that could be a really cool. I mean, it's almost like, I don't want to call it an organic effect, but in a way, it's an authentic effect. So,
so one of the things I've been discussing in this, and this is perfect. With the musicians, when I've been doing this, is I have this kind of idea that at certain ages you develop these aesthetic tastes. So like, I do industrial, or a lot of that anyway. And the soundscape that my brain really responds to is Star Wars based, like the lightsabers, but specifically the way the voices sound when they're talking ship to ship. And so when I heard shortwave radio voices, I was like, that's the sound. That's where that came from. Whereas like, Cyanotic, right? Who Sean's just like, a little bit younger than me. So his point of reference is Terminator. So he's got just a slightly different sounds that he's starting with, But so yeah.
A little lower budget.
Well, yeah, but that shortwave sound is yeah. I've got multiple plugins that I use all the time to simulate it. I actually have a. I was walking down South Street in the very early '90s, and there was a payphone that had been busted, and the mouthpiece, the microphone for it was hanging out. So I just grabbed it and took it, and have since built microphones out of it, and it sounds exactly the way you would expect a microphone made out of a
Oh,
house
wow, that's
telephone to
cool.
sound.
That's really cool. And
Hmm.
that was a tiny little microphone in
Yeah, it
there.
was like maybe the size of a stack of quarters.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it works both ways too. Like I had to get a an older a vintage dial phone for a music video I did, and after I was done with it, I actually took the earpiece out and that and made microphones out of both of those as well. So and one out of a CB radio mic. But yeah, no, I love the way that sounds, and that's exactly what I find so interesting because you know because it's not just a static it's the sound, it's literally the sound of the magnetosphere, it's the sound of picking up like just the crackles and stuff from the sun hitting the corona, the shit, Justin was here, he could say, but hitting our magnetic sphere and doing what it does. It's kind of the sonic equivalent of the Northern Lights, so yeah, that shit's cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So, so in your collection, do you have anything that's particularly prized or, you know, or valuable?
I do have some valuable stuff, but I was speaking to my friend Ray about this the other day. I'm so into just having the music itself
Mhm.
that chasing down original pressings on things, if they fall in my lap, great. But I don't go too far out of my way. So let's just say, let's take a great R&B singer like Sam Cooke. Um, I have some original pressings, but I'm equally as content with stuff from the 70s and 80s as long as it sounds pretty good. I don't necessarily need the it's funny. Sometimes you can get those same, let's just say there's a real valuable record from the 40s with the original 12 songs on it, but it sounds just like this pressing over here with the same 12 songs on it. I don't need the $1,000 pressing.
See,
So,
I love that because I'm like I have a lot of this, everything that I have a lot of, it's because I use it. Like I have a lot of art supplies. I have a lot of this stuff because they're tools. But otherwise and books. But otherwise, like I've never understood the mindset, the collector mindset where it's like, well, here they are. And I don't do anything with them, but they're there.
yeah, and in fact, I've only because I recently got my comic book collection back,
Mhm.
and and now that I'm looking into seeing, what kind of value they have, and I've heard about this before. This wasn't the first time I heard about it, but I'm becoming a little bit more familiar with. You take the comic, you send it off to this place, they seal it in a permanent bag, and they grade it. And so, if I was to sell Silver Surfer #1, let's say, and let's say it's worth $400, the person buying it isn't opening it.
Right.
They're buying it just to covet it.
Mhm.
Well, they can look at the cover, but they can't open it because once they open it, I think
Yeah.
I think that they're permanently sealed. I think the same is true of baseball cards or any collectible, Star Wars figures, whatever it happens to
Moment
be.
to drive the
They
car off the lot.
become graded, right? I mean, well, actually, the Star Wars figures that are worth the most are the ones in the blister pack.
Mhm.
So you can't even. I mean, not that. I guess guys our age would be sitting there like, "Luke, I am your father." Like, so I
No, it's
guess.
crazy. Donna still has all of her Star Wars figures and all of their guns.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, they all live in one of those Darth Vader
oh,
cases.
the Darth Vader helmet case.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. It swings open.
Yep.
But but yeah, I think it's just there's some collectors, there's just some comfort in knowing you have it. And so I guess what ends up happening is that you have the original Johnny Ace 78 of Pledging My Love, but you don't listen to it. Instead, you look at it while you listen to it on Spotify.
Mhm.
So I guess that's how it goes. Well, there are some psychos out there, and I can't blame them. I mean, I have a pretty good ear, but I don't have that kind of ear where, I mean, yes, I can, with the right stereo and you're listening to a classic album on vinyl of some kind, you can hear that bottom and that warmth that vinyl gives. It's true.
Mhm.
But, but sometimes, whether it's on Spotify or if you have good headphones, or CD, it doesn't really matter to me as long as, as long as I'm enjoying what I'm listening to, that's the most important thing. So I don't, like I said, if I stumble upon the original one, great. But if it's a little later, I'm okay with that. The same is true of books too, and anything that I collect.
Right,
So
right.
I mean, I like you. I think you and I have talked about this before, but I like that illustrator Harry Clark, who did Edgar Allan Poe and a bunch of other things, and some stained glass windows. He was an interesting illustrator. I only recently acquired the original Edgar Allan Poe he did. I don't know, circa 1920, somewhere in there, 1915. And it's got the lifted plates inside and it's to see the original, well, remember, they're not the original sketches, of course, but to see the first pressing of this book, the
Mhm.
quality is just on such another level. Now, I've owned cheaper versions of it that are just, they're the flat prints on paper. And they're still great, but it is a bit of a different experience.
When I was in school, I was in DC and I went to Corcoran, and then I had to go and I was doing a paper on Edvard Munch. And so I went to the National, and they have a whole research library there where you can literally go and check out original prints that he made. Like they're a screen print physically. He had actually printed. I was like holding them in my hands. It was just this crazy. I probably can't do that now, but yeah, it's like it was just one of those really cool moments of like, here's the thing. So
You get to see how the sausage is made.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or you can get as close to the experience as
yeah.
possible. But I think
Or
that
you can eat them.
that's what we like so much though about, I mean, again, the artists that I'm fanatical about. I try to get as close to the experience as I can, whether it's vocalists or actual musicians, or whether it's painters or poets or anything. You perhaps you go to their birthplace, perhaps you go to where they made their art, perhaps you go to their grave, whatever it happens to be. But you want to try to get as close to that experience as possible. I know I do, and so. I think I was using a little phrase earlier in this conversation about breadcrumbs, because I feel like each one of those artists will lead you to another artist.
Mhm.
The thing that turned me on when I was a kid, when I got into something, I tried to find out. Well, let's just say when I got into a band or a writer or something, you try to find out who they were into
Mhm.
and go down that rabbit hole, and it takes you pretty far.
So let's see, you have been an active musician forever, like since you were in your late teens, I think. Well, you were what was it? Damn it. Uh
Oh, you're thinking of Fahrenheit 451.
yeah, I wasn't sure if it was executive or if it was Fahrenheit, which one came first.
Fahrenheit
Um
came first, yeah.
Fahrenheit came first. Um so and then executive, and then Spahn Ranch, which was where I became aware of you. Um and so now that you have collected all of these songs and you're able to kind of look back on the entire history of 20th century music from the standpoint of a songwriter, do you feel that you have learned from listening to this and hearing can you hear like the differences in songwriting styles from the early part of the 20th century to later? Do you feel that is something you're able to incorporate, or I don't know. Like, I'm not exactly entirely sure where I'm even going with this, but I
No,
think,
I know where you're going because I know where I want to go with
okay,
what you
cool,
just said.
good.
So you are onto something. Um, Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't think I started to really listen in that way um, until my 40s.
Mm,
And so it took a long time for me to realize I used to view rock-based music, and that includes everything goth, industrial, punk. It doesn't really matter, but it's rock-based,
mhm,
let's say. It may not sound like rock and roll, but it is
mhm,
rock-based. I view rock-based music as such a different animal from Tin Pan Alley and from jazz, and classical to a certain extent, opera. I viewed them as being such different things that I didn't realize until later in my career that sure they're different, but you can take aspects of jazz, of classical, of Gregorian chants, it doesn't really matter, into what you're doing, not necessarily in a direct way,
like not in
but
a one-to-one way, but something might spark I find this happening an awful lot because I do so much sampling. It's like going, okay, I hear where you're going with this, and this is how it kind of would work with this other thing.
well, there was also another thing too that I almost wish, I mean, I probably did a little bit of this kind of thing. I didn't think about it. And so if I did it, then it was more incidental. But let's even go into my Spahn Ranch years. So in, 93 to 2000. Um, I wish I had been, when a standard singer would sing a standard in the 40s and 50s, there's a way that you sing the first verse a bit quietly and perhaps the first chorus a little more quietly, and then you pass the bridge in the song, you come back around and you sing, but let's just say you're into the third verse now and you sing the third verse much differently than you did the first verse, and then you sing the final chorus differently than there was the way that they would build a song or the way that a song would be interpreted. It never really dawned on me to do that with the bands I was in. I did a little bit of it that was more incidental, like, oh,
Mhm.
this is you just sing the outro with a little bit more, energy or something, a little bit more angst. But it was it was almost like there was like low gear and high gear, and that's pretty much all I would be able to do. But even though maybe it's not a Cole Porter song, it doesn't matter because the fucking Beatles did it
Mhm.
and the Stones did it and and Little Richard did it, and yet I didn't really know that that's what I was listening to for most of my life. It started to come later.
Mhm.
And so you can apply the same rules to it, even though, the music is different, but the idea is pretty much the same.
Mhm.
So I mean, I've been incorporating other eras into my music for a long time. I mean, I pretty much still look like a 30s crooner when I go out with noir. And it's just something I've kind of dragged along.
Mhm.
But I do think that there's ways of dragging vocal styles and or mixing or mashing up vocal styles from another era into this
Mhm.
and to make it, I mean, others have done it, so I mean I'm certainly not the first to do it, but yeah, I think I've been trying to incorporate other eras into what I'm doing because in a strange way, okay, so it's 2025, it's the closest I can get to 1945 is by integrating elements of that era,
Mhm.
let's say visually, and in some ways also orally, So, uh, but I can only integrate some of them. I could never really be in that
Right.
era. So I feel like it took me a long time to find the right balance with that. Then there's always, you do artwork, you do your graphics. I do a lot of art direction on my stuff, and I try to bring in elements of
You have a
that.
very strong aesthetic with the masks and let me tell you, I've seen people do that trick before, and you're the only guy I've ever seen pull it off where it actually looks appropriate. Like normally it's like we're trying like it's an easy out for trying to be dramatic or whatever, but because of the whole aesthetic of everything you do, it works, which is very cool. Like it's actually tasteful as opposed to you bought that at the art supply store. So, like it just fits with the whole thing.
Some people just think I'm trying to, it's an homage to, is it the Crazy Eights in that Tarantino movie?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I do actually really love that movie, but
Well, I want to see you, if you're going to do that, I want to see you come out in the tight yellow bodysuit.
yeah, the Uma Thurman outfit with the samurai sword.
Mhm.
But yeah, that almost happened by accident, and that actually one New Year's Eve, I was playing with Spahn Ranch at the Trocadero in Philadelphia, and I always liked the idea of a masked, a masquerade, let's say, where and again, what would they? It's a masquerade with what do they call it? A masked masquerade? No,
And that's great. Like
a masquerade. Yeah. Um, so it was New Year's Eve, and I really thought it was very appropriate. I was wearing a tuxedo that night, and I came out with the mask on. So this is, I don't even know, 98, maybe 97 or somewhere in there. And it didn't stick, but I liked it. It was one night I did it. And then it came up at Dragon Con when I was in black tape for a blue girl.
Mhm.
I ended up buying a mask at Dragon Con, and I wore it on stage that night, and then it stuck. And then I just kind of liked it, and then I brought it over to noir, and it seems very fitting. So, and now of course, the whole band in noir,
Mhm.
best masks. So,
I remember when I saw you in Spawn Ranch the first time, and I think it was actually the first night we actually met face to face. Um, I didn't know what you looked like prior to that. So in my head, the dude singing Heretics Fork was totally not what I was expecting. Like I was like, wow, I was really just expecting much more of the industrial thing. So yeah, that was which was cool because it was you guys and I want to say it was like Kevorkian Death Cycle, which was
oh, I remember in DC.
it was in DC. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
Bad Nation.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was that big warehouse.
Hmm.
That was that was a great club. We played there a couple of times.
Yeah. I mean, like Bowie played there, or Prince would go, they have a night off and they'd go and play at it. Like, yeah, we lost that and the Trock's gone. Like, that was one of my favorite places to play was the Trock. Like,
In
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I was just in Philly a couple of weeks ago, and I decided to. It was a friend of mine's birthday, and she wanted to meet at that Belarusian band Molchat Doma, and so they were playing at. Oh God, I can't even think of the damn name of the place. It's what the Electric Factory used to be,
Hmm.
but her and her husband were there, and I was going to meet them there. And I decided to walk from my hotel from Rittenhouse Square, and I walked right past the Trocadero. Sadly, it's all boarded up, but it has been the story I've heard is that it has been uh, it's landmarked,
Hmm.
so they can't tear it down.
Right.
So there's been some money put aside for it, but I don't know what's going to happen to it. But I did love that room.
For those of you who don't know what the Trocadero was, it was just this absolutely beautiful theater in Philly. I remember walking on stage the first time and looking out and seeing the audience and seeing the first row, and then just you slowly crane, and then there's like these two more layers of balcony above that, and you're just 6 feet. It was just an absolutely beautiful. beautiful venue. And if you ever saw 12 Monkeys, it was the theater that they get beaten up in. They get beaten up inside the Trocadero, but then they ran out of a theater in Baltimore, which we actually used to live half a block away from. So that was kind of funny.
Oh yeah, I know. You know, it's funny. I was thinking of that movie recently. I need to revisit that with all of these viruses and things. I've been meaning to revisit that movie. That was actually really good.
It's fantastic movie. Yeah, and it holds up really well. Like actually watched it again recently for the first time in a while.
Mm.
Um, so and then yeah, I think that's probably pretty solid. Unless there's some other really cool thing you can think of about the collections that you do. Really exciting.
Well, collecting. Oh my, there's so many layers to it, you know. But the truth is, as much as I'm still knee deep in it, bicycles,
What?
records,
Oh,
cars, comic books, trains, coins, uh, 8 by 12s of and I'm sorry, 8 by 10s, I guess, of like a lot of movie stars I like. I mean books. The collections never seem to end, but I have been cutting back a little bit. There always comes a time where you have to kind of realize that you can't take it with you.
mhm.
So I'm starting to trim back a little bit on things. And you know, I'm taking advantage of the fact that some of it's, you know, got value and it might be a good time to shave off a few things. But I try to buy, I mean, again, I almost have these crazy little rules, like you only bring in one new thing if you get rid of two or three things. So I'm trying to do that kind of thing. But yeah, but now we're in bicycle weather, so I'll be getting the old bicycles out. So again, I definitely have too many hobbies. So
You know what though? I mean that's good. Like if it brings you happiness, then and doesn't hurt anybody else, man. And that's a rare thing these days. So, do you have a penny farthing?
no, I don't, but it's funny. I've always admired them.
Yeah,
And I've never been on one.
that's a terrifying thought. Like just
Yeah.
the idea of trying to actually ride one of those. I
I
just
mean, I've seen them I mean, it looks like you put one leg on a pedal and then you push with the other leg. And then as you're rolling, you then switch out, put your leg over, and then you start riding.
You
So
don't have any sort of gearing system or anything. You're just literally just turning the wheel with your
yes.
thumb, right? Yeah.
And no, in fact, come to think of it, you're right. There is no coaster brake on it. So I'm not even, oh, you know what? I think by going reverse,
Yeah.
like a track bike or something, you could slow down a little bit. But man, they're pretty scary.
Yeah.
But they're very cool though.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for tolerating with technical problems, and please thank your wife for helping us figure
Thank you,
everything.
Steve.
Yeah, man. All right.
I'm glad we did this. That was great. Thank you.
Good. Good. Me too. Thank you. Right. So as always, you can find prints, original artwork, T-shirt, tarot deck, whatever else we're selling at any given time at egolikeness.bigcartel.com. You can find all the latest news about stuff, egolikenessband.com. We are on Bandcamp, egolikeness.bandcamp.com. Stoneburner is stoneburnerofficial.bandcamp.com. All of my projects are under Wolfcore Records, so it's wolfcore-records.bandcamp.com or stephenarcher.bandcamp.com, etc. We're pretty easy to find. You can find our books on Amazon. We're published through Raw Dog Screaming Press. Ego is currently on Metropolis Records. Stoneburner is currently on Cop International. And we're also pretty easy to find on the social networks. We're there under our names, Stephen Archer, Donald Lynch on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Ego Likeness, Art and Music with little underscores between each letter or between each word. And then Don's got us on Bluetooth. Don's got us on Blue Sky as well. This is like the fifth of these I've recorded, so this is the one I'm using.